Okay, and we're ready to move on then to our next area, and this is for the Democratic County runoff for the County Commissioner Precinct 2. And just so everyone knows, we did issue a wide range of invitations, and for all these races, we did invite everybody who was on the ballot, who's going to be on the ballot. And Michelle Gutierrez Cohen is with us today and has asked if she could join the meeting, and we would like to welcome you, Michelle. And so if you're ready to go, we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, KBAD. Thank you for inviting me to today's meeting. It's great to see everyone. Again, my name is Dr. Michelle Gutierrez Cohen, and I am running for Hays County Commissioner for Precinct 2. I am a grassroots organizer with over 20 years of supply chain experience. I have worked for the state for 11 years total as a state purchaser and a contracts manager. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership, and I have lived in this district for a combined 30 years. So I wanted to spend my time talking about my priorities, not so much about my whole history, just because of the time. So my top 3 priorities that I want to address if elected is first, public health and safety for all residents. I want to ensure that the law enforcement has the resources and the training to be successful and protected, as well as building relationships with our community. And because we are still in a pandemic, making sure that vaccines and testing are available for everyone, and that we address the health disparities that currently exist within our county. Next, improve road infrastructure and solutions. So I'm not just talking about fixing potholes, but creating roads that accommodate not only vehicles, but pedestrians and cyclists. If you notice, we just keep building and building homes on our roads, and our roads are not keeping up with that growth, causing residents to sit longer in traffic, adding strain to their pocketbooks, and putting more pollution into the air. And let's consider a more robust public transportation option, an option that travels up and down I-35 from Buda to San Marcos daily, stopping at major neighborhoods that provide that access to medical care, hospitals, grocery stores, all the basic necessities that residents should have. And lastly, smarter economic and equitable growth. Let's bring in more than just warehouses and fast food venues. Let's consider high-tech companies that are environmentally conscious companies. Let's build more community centers and libraries in areas without direct access to those. Let's advocate for more affordable housing, not just mixed-use buildings that cram all of those who can't afford a home into one place, as everyone has a right to live in a home and raise their family. And I didn't wait for an election to do something for my community. I've been doing the work for quite some time. In fact, I formed an organization that, as a direct response to the racial disparities of COVID against Latino communities, but also rural areas. And so I continue that work today. And it's very evident to me the need that we must address and all the issues that are in this county. I'm ready to do that work. Thank you, KBAD.
Okay, thank you. And I'm checking the chat to see if there are any questions. I don't see any. Do any of the members have a question that they would like to pose to Michelle? Okay, I'll ask one. So Michelle, we recently went through redistricting, and in the county, the districts look a lot different than they looked before. For instance, I was in precinct 2, and I'm not now. So how do you see that new precinct that you're in, and your way? How do you reflect that precinct in your campaign, and hopefully, if you should win in your position?
Thank you, Jeff, for that question. Like you, I was in precinct 1 before the district was redrawn. Now I'm in 2. So thanks, Lon Shell, for giving me that opportunity, I guess. But Uh, as far as the demographics of the precinct, it's over 50% Latino. Okay, I'm a Latina, um, and I've lived in this district. I've been doing the work, so I understand a lot of the need. The precinct runs east of I-35, and it scoops in Plum Creek, which is interesting. Um, but as a representative, elected official, I'm here to support everyone, and I do exactly that. And I want to address everyone's needs and help just make it a better precinct. We have an opportunity to really create a precinct that is equal for everyone and that everyone has the resources accessible to where they need. And I don't want to disappear either. I don't want to be a county commissioner that just disappears once they're elected. I mean, when's the last time you've had a town hall with a county commissioner? I've never been to one. So I'm going to be accessible. I'm going to be in the community, talking to the community every chance I get to make sure they understand what a county commissioner does and what their role is and how to reach out to me whenever there's an issue. So I want to be the people's county commissioner, truly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And you have about 30 seconds left. I don't see any more questions. Does the group have any questions for Dr. Cohen?
I just want to say we got 2,200 votes in the primary, right? We'll probably get half of that, maybe even less than half of that in the runoff. But we only have 5 days of early voting. And really, literally, I think every vote is going to count in order for me to be successful in this election. So my ask is that you come back, get your neighbors to come back and go vote. It's going to be really difficult. It's going to be voter fatigue. There's no weekend voting for the early voting for us. It's going to be difficult. So I'm just asking all the members to please reach out to your neighbors and your friends who live in the district and get out and vote.
Okay, thank you. Important. Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen. And we will move along now to statewide Democratic runoff candidates. And we have Joe Jaworski if we're looking at alphabetical, and is he here? I don't see
He's not in the meeting right now, Jeff, so we may need to move on to our candidates who are here, which is the land commissioners.
Okay, and we do have a video that we're going to be showing later for the other candidate in that race. So let's move on. Jay Kleberg, and I believe you are here, and you're kind of restricted by time, so I'm glad we were able to get to you here early on. So you may not have been here when I read the ground rules. Basically, I've got a timer. You've got 3 minutes to give your spiel, and then 2 minutes for questions from the group. And there will not be obviously a lot of back and forth. This is about you introducing yourself and your stand on your priorities. So Mr. Kleberg, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thanks for having me, KBAD. And I'm just up the road in Travis County, where I've lived for about 11 years. Jay Kleberg, Democratic candidate for Texas Land Commissioner. And I've got 20 years of experience in natural resource management, land conservation work as an environmental advocate, as an entrepreneur, and as associate director for Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, where I helped lead a team that raised $100 million for land, water, and wildlife conservation in the state of Texas, and then managed the largest land transaction for conservation purposes in Texas history, with disaster funding that came out of the wake of Deepwater Horizon. This is a really important office, and it's one that I think that we can win in November. The General Land Office was established in 1836. It's an independent constitutional office that manages 13 million acres of public lands, generates more than $1 billion a year off of that, in part going to the largest educational endowment in the country, the Permanent School Fund, which then benefits K through 12 education. It also oversees the Veterans Land Board, which manages 9 veterans homes, 4 veteran cemeteries, and a loan program for veterans for homes, land, and home improvements. It oversees the management and part of the re-envisioning of the Alamo, as well as 83% of its budget is in federal natural disaster relief funding. And those at the state level for the last 20 years have overlooked and ignored many of the warning signs that we all see today that are challenges that we have to face. We're number one in CO2 emissions in the country. We lead the nation in billion-dollar natural disasters. We're going to see a doubling of 100-degree days in the next 15 years. And we are 44th in K through 12 per pupil spending in the United States. And the General Land Office can lead the way in addressing some of these problems. But instead of doing that, those who have held this office for the last 20 years have used it as a stepping stone. And they have underfunded to the tune of $720 million alone in 2018, our K through 12 system, oversaw a death rate that was double that of any other long-term care facility in Texas during the pandemic in those 9 veterans homes. And they have failed to diversify the portfolio of that 13 million acres of energy production and revenue, and to the point where we have 1 wind and 1 solar lease generating only $300,000 a year towards a system that in the state of Texas relies heavily on oil and gas and those mineral estates. We've got to diversify the income of the General Land Office. I've got the experience to do this job. We have built a strong campaign with about 75 endorsements from electeds and former electeds and organizations like the Sierra Club and AFL-CIO and Planned Parenthood. So thank you all for having me, because this is an important race that not a lot of people understand.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any questions. Does anyone have a question? Any of the members have a question they'd like to pose? And if not, I have one.
Got one too.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Kleberg, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Just want to ask you, with the latest IPCC report and CO2 emissions and where we're headed in terms of what that report says over the next 10 years in terms of what's required for us to maintain literal survival.
Yeah.
I'm wondering in what ways you plan for the General Land Office to contribute natural solutions, not just energy reductions in CO2 emissions, but nature-based solutions to climate change and CO2 emissions.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that. Couple of ways. One, in that 13 million acre portfolio, we have 1 million acres of fee simple upland acreage in the Big Bend region that we could be looking at carbon sequestration and carbon credits through soil there. There are other states that are looking at this as well as a way to generate revenue, not just for public schools, but also to combat this #1 ranking as a CO2 emitter in the nation. The second, in terms of natural infrastructure, is there's a vision for 1,000 miles of a living coastline, in part that comes out of Rice University, that I would support. And there's about a $20 million project that's coming out of Hart Research Institute right now that I think the General Land Office should get behind to build natural oyster reefs along the Texas coast, in part starting in Corpus, but then also a mechanism to generate oysters and produce those in a mobile units that we can send up and down the coast. And essentially what you've got with those oyster reefs, because we've lost more than 85% of oysters in the state of Texas over the last 10 years, is a carbon sink. Those oyster reefs can sequester carbon, not necessarily in their shells they can, but also the big production is in how they filter water and filter carbon dioxide in that process. So there's a huge benefit to doing that, and also dune replenishment and coastline protection. But that's a big way, those two, soil carbon sequestration and also in a living coastline, that the General Land Office could play a huge role in.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions. I'll ask one that may take more than your remaining less than 20 seconds.
Okay.
You talked a little bit about your responsibility for veterans. Can you tell us some of your priorities and what you would do with those responsibilities to assist the veterans?
Yeah, I visited a veterans home in Harlingen, and I think that following the science behind not just the pandemic, but how we manage those long-term care facilities is really important. If we get into another situation where we've got to follow real science, and I think that's why we've had such a death rate. The second is that we've got a loan program that's underutilized. 1.4 million veterans in the state of Texas. About 7,000 are taking advantage of this program, and those rates, the interest rates that we currently have, are not competitive, and they should be more. They should be real low interest loans, and they aren't right now. So those are a couple of things that I would focus on.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your joining us.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have Sandra Grace Martinez, who I believe is here as well. And she is also running for land commissioner.
Hello, can you hear me and see me fine?
Yes, it's a little bit weak. Your voice, can you make your voice a little bit louder or stand a little bit
I
closer?
sure can. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
All right, thank you for having me, Kate. We just drove down, and I'm so sorry about those damn billboards. It just sucks, seeing those damn billboards. So I'll start off with I'm a thoroughbred when it comes to being a Democrat, and I find those things offensive. And my name is Sandra Grace Martinez. I am born and raised here in the Alamo City. I've been a Texas resident for quite some time. I won't say my age, but my entire life. I am a proud Texan. I'm a proud mother of 2 kiddos. One is a Marine and one has autism. And happily married to a gentleman who runs and helps me run this particular endeavor, this journey. And also, side note, I have a homeless man who helps me as well. So we are a party of 3. And I'm proud to say it because it takes a little bit of innovation in running campaigns post-COVID. It's important to note that at some time, I did have maybe $9 in my coffers, and here I am still standing. I'm not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I want to make it very clear that money does not really make for an outstanding turnout at the polls. What makes an outstanding turnout at the polls is what we have at stake. And the soul of our party, the very soul of our party is at stake if we don't pivot in the right direction. I enjoy seeing that there are women on the ticket upwards and downwards all over Texas, commissioners court, municipalities, district clerks, statewide races. Not very many people enter. And I entered knowing fully well what I was up against. And I'm glad to tell you that that theory of having a lot of money and having a lot of endorsements is going to move the masses is not happened. I'm here by the grace of God, and also will tell you that being a licensed professional counselor, knowing a little bit about the human condition does certainly help in this particular race, because knowing what the needs of the community are in terms of behavioral changes due to mental health conditions are important. We are definitely struggling post-COVID. I think it was a collective trauma that we've had, body bags being seen all over God's, green earth, and especially in Texas. I'm a former parole officer, former child protective investigator. I've worked in the trenches of legislation. So all the things that I can say regarding this particular race is going to be within the 4 corners of the statute and what we can and cannot do. Now, what I can say is, and I'll end with this, is that I believe that women need to be in places of leadership. I believe that we can address climate change very differently. I believe that more women on this ticket will make for a great race and great turnout for the Democrats. We need thoroughbreds that are Democrats through and through, not jumping back and forth in sandboxes. We need to take a position of enough is enough. We need to understand what is at stake. And like I said, it's the soul of this party. If you have any questions in my positions, of course, regarding veterans' needs,
Okay,
education,
we do have a question,
certainly.
and Mark Trahan is going to ask, I believe, a question.
Hi, Ms. Martinez. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Very much appreciate it. I was wondering, with the latest IPCC report that came out that indicated that with carbon output in our, just in general, that right now we're on a path to destruction. And IPCC makes it very clear that our carbon emissions have to peak and go down by 2025. And I'm wondering what your solutions are in this particular position to natural-based and nature-based solutions to carbon sequestration, but also dealing with the effects of climate change. Thank you.
Well, I found it very interesting to, celebrate Earth Day and having people who dedicate their entire life into these very important issues not really have a lot of data backing. They have data in terms of sequestration, and I believe that we're going to have to revert to what can the general land do and not do. Unfortunately, within the four corners of the statute, there's only about could be about two sentences, it's just gibberish, but it's 2 paragraphs regarding prevention of pollution. In my opinion, the legislature needs to step up and make that a lot more paragraphs for us to read. It's important to understand my position as a woman that we need a lot more women in the boards that serve under the general land office. At this time, there's only 1, maybe 2 women. They serve secondary roles in the board. And I will underscore again, I think that Mother Earth needs another mother. I mean, here in Texas, we need more mothers. We need more support systems. Now, no insult against our men, but we have to look at this from other lenses. We need more women in those boards. And when we can change the climate of what those boards are and diversify, not portfolios and whatnot, but diversify the tapestry of those boards, I believe that we can start thinking outside the box, gather the data that we need worldwide. This is a worldwide effort. It's global warming. And so I'm glad to know that my position is to create a hope incubator that has many young ladies that are able, scientists inclined, that are able to help us move forward. And of course, all the things that Jay said, and we can Google that information, but we got to look at the GLO and what we can and cannot do. My position is changing the tapestry of those boards.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martinez. We appreciate you coming today and joining KBAD very much. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on then to, I believe I saw Mike Collier arrive. Hello,
Here I
Mike.
am.
Mike Collier
Good
is running
afternoon.
for Lieutenant Governor. And I don't know if you were here when I gave the ground rules out or not, but you have 3 minutes for your introduction. And then there'll be 2 minutes for questions from the members. And you'll hear my timer just like you did just now when your 3 minutes is up. So take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jeff. And thanks, everyone. I'm delighted to see you. I wish we could be together. On the one hand, we did learn a new skill, Zoom. So I had some in-person events and some Zoom events. And so we're actually able to be in more than one place at one time. But I much prefer being together in person because it's just good for the soul to be out amongst Democrats fighting a good fight here. My name is Mike Collier. I'm running against Dan Patrick. I don't have to tell you that he's the worst lieutenant governor in the history of our state, an embarrassment, a shock to anybody who cares about their fellow man and decency and democracy. And I'm delighted to be running against him a second time because I nearly beat him 4 years ago. And it's a big state, and you've got to have such a large infrastructure to really mount an effective campaign. I felt I owed it to myself and to the party and to the state to stay in this fight. And so I'm delighted to be back in it. You know, we don't have to go through chapter and verse what a terrible lieutenant governor is, but it's always wonderful to stop for just a moment and think about how great it will be when the next lieutenant governor is a Democrat. If you're passionate about public education and view it as a moral obligation, and you're concerned about teachers and making sure our teachers are happy and feel respected and stay in the profession, we need a Democrat. Expand Medicaid, we need a Democrat. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. We know that, we live that. I heard a minute ago, climate change. They're denying climate change and we're doomed if we don't turn this around. Only a Democrat will turn it around. And we have to fix the damn grid, but there's a linkage between fixing the grid and climate change because it's got to be technology driven, solar and wind and all of the enabling technologies. And we have to work very quickly and very aggressively. And then there's other things. Water is going to be a big issue because the smart people are saying the drought that we're in now is going to extend. Republicans don't do a thing about that. And then finally, in 3 minutes, I got to tell you, this is a fight for our Constitution. This is a fight for what we cherish as Americans and our rights, the right to vote, the right to have our voice heard, the right to law and order and the rule of law, and our rights as individuals, the LGBT community's right to live and love as they wish, not as the dictates of the legislature, the right to free speech in our schools, and of course, a woman's right to be in control of her own destiny and the only choices that only she can make, and healthcare decisions that only she can make. That's what this race is all about. And I'll say one last thing. We are not some fringe protest movement. We represent the majority point of view of the state. The problem is that our politics are held in the iron grip of zealots on the Republican side of the aisle. All we have to do is win these statewide races. One, I'd like to win all of them. Just one win statewide race so that Republicans realize that democracy works. They have to consider our point of view, our meaning Texans' point of view. And that's what this election cycle is all about. So I hope I can count on your help.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm looking here in the chat to see if there are any questions. I don't see. Does anyone from the floor, any of our members have a question for Mr. Collier? Okay. If not, I'll jump in with one. So, Mr. Collier, you laid out a very interesting agenda, powerful agenda. How would you work with a Senate that is potentially still a majority Republican when you get elected?
Yeah, good question, Jeff. And that question comes up a lot. As you all know, the lieutenant governor, per our Constitution, is the president of the Senate. So the lieutenant governor decides how committees are constituted, what bills will be voted on, gives the lieutenant governor enormous leverage in terms of setting the agenda and then negotiating to get what he or she wants. And as the first Democrat lieutenant governor in many years, I will be presiding over a Senate that almost certainly will be majority Republican. The first order of business is to defeat Dan Patrick because he is the worst and he brings out the worst in everyone. He is the one who sets this culture war agenda. This Mike Collier's lieutenant governor will set an agenda where we've got a handful of problems we have to solve immediately, like fixing the grid, like dealing effectively with climate change, like finding funding for public education, like solving this property tax crisis that Dan Patrick is not honest about. Now, we're not going to agree on how to solve each of these problems, but we'll be fighting on them and we'll be working on them. And this lieutenant governor not only can set the agenda and get us working on these issues, but doing it in a very transparent way. So the Texans really know what is the debate, what are the issues, what are the costs and benefits of the different options that we might take. It'll be very, very different world, much more difficult for Republicans to manipulate the public's point of view on these things, to be dishonest about these things, when we are forced to deal honestly as Texans with the issues that matter. You'll see a very different legislature.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone else have a question from the floor?
I have a quick
Kate has a question. Go ahead, Kate.
Mr. Collier, I want you to win so badly. And I just wonder if you could give me some hope about what's different between your campaign or your chances or what. Can can I count on you winning is what I want to know.
Okay, we have about 20 seconds for that. Go ahead, sir.
We will win if we turn out to vote, if we fight, and if we turn out to vote. The Democrats and the folks that want Dan Patrick gone outnumber the folks that want him to stay. We saw a poll recently, Rice University surveyed 1,400 people. This was a nonpartisan poll. Dan Patrick failed to muster 50%. He came in at 49%. I came in 43%. There's a bunch of undecideds, and they are not undecided as to Dan Patrick. They're only undecided as to me because they don't know me. So if with your help, we get people to get to know me, that's where our path to victory is, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, sir. You timed that just perfectly. We appreciate that very much. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. And we'll see you in person soon.
All right, then. Yes. So it looks like Joe Jaworski, who is running for Attorney General, is not going to be joining us, David, unless you have an update on that.
I have not heard back, so I don't expect him to join at this point.
Okay, so I think we're about ready to wrap this segment of our meeting. There's all that good stuff in the chat, David. I saved it, but I think that's just saved to my computer. Is there a way we can save it for people to reference in the future, or should they just copy things down?
Oh, a lot of the information about our candidates is on the county party website. And I wanted to mention that the county party website has evolved tremendously in the last few months, and there's a wealth of information on there. I'll post the links on there again in the chat, but I think most of you guys will be able to find it pretty easily. And that's actually a pretty good transition here because we are going to be heading over now to talk to Mark Trahan, our county party chair. Let me stop the recording portion here so we can share this with our other folks that weren't able to be here today, though.
And if I might just make one quick comment, I want to thank all the candidates who spoke with us today. It takes a lot to get before a group like this. It takes a lot to run a campaign. And I just appreciate you standing up for Texas and trying to win this for Democrats. Thank you all.